You find it beneath the dust, a single slab of black stone that shouldn't exist. Its carvings shimmer faintly, as if reacting to your breath. The patterns speak of cities that haven't been built, wars that haven't been fought, and stars that haven't yet appeared in the sky. Every test says it's ancient, impossibly ancient, yet the story it tells is from our future. The scientists whisper about it in half-finished sentences, afraid the air itself might be listening. They call it the stone that shouldn't speak. But maybe it isn't speaking at all. Maybe it's remembering you. You lean closer. The air hums soft, metallic, alive. For a heartbeat, you feel time folding in on itself like the past and the future are breathing through the same crack in reality. Then the sound fades, leaving only silence, and the strange certainty that the stone has just noticed you back. It stands where the earth has tried and failed to forget it. The markings twist in impossible harmony, written in languages that never met yet flow as one unbroken thought. Every curve hums with intention, like geometry caught mid-prayer. Experts deny what they see. Believers call it divine. But beneath the arguments and the carbon dates, one truth remains: the stone feels alive. It remembers something humanity has lost, and now it's ready to whisper again. Before we venture further into the shadows, take a moment to subscribe, so you never miss a secret that history has tried to forget. Now listen. The ground itself exhales. The whisper begins. The discovery wasn't supposed to happen. The excavation site had been marked as unremarkable, just another patch of dry earth in a forgotten valley, where the wind spoke louder than history. The archaeologists came expecting pottery shards or a few ancient tools, maybe the remains of a settlement swallowed by time. Instead, their shovels struck something that sang. Not literally, of course, though. One of the interns swore she felt a vibration run up the metal handle into her palm like a pulse. It was the first heartbeat of the stone awakening. The team unearthed it slowly, layer by layer, brushing away the compacted soil that clung to it, like a secret unwilling to be freed. There was no debris from nearby habitation, no trace of construction around it. And yet the sediment told a different story. It wasn't deposited by centuries of wind or flood. It was packed deliberately, each layer distinct, intentional. Someone had buried the monolith on purpose, sealing it away beneath the earth's quiet skin. At first, they thought it was a tomb marker, a monument to some forgotten ruler. But monuments are made to be seen. This one was meant to be hidden. The soil contained traces of burnt myrrh, powdered hematite, and what appeared to be ash ritual materials, perhaps though no burial site on record matched the composition. It was as though the earth itself had been turned into a protective sheath. The head archaeologist, Dr. Leon Ortega, kept a personal log. Her handwriting grew less steady with each entry. "This wasn't buried," she wrote one night under the pale light of her tent lamp. It was silenced. The team camped beside the excavation for nearly 3 months. During that time, they noticed odd patterns in the surrounding landscape. The vegetation, sparse desert grass, and a few stubborn shrubs grew in a perfect spiral around the pit. Compass readings twitched unpredictably. GPS signals wavered, as if the monolith's presence distorted space in subtle, invisible waves. Some joked that their coffee always went cold faster near the dig site. Others stopped joking altogether. When the full slab was finally revealed, standing upright like a frozen thought, it measured nearly 4 meters high and 2 across. The surface was unnaturally smooth, though it shimmered faintly under direct sunlight, like heat rising off asphalt. Every photograph captured faint distortions, a soft blur around the edges, as if the stone resisted being documented. One night, a small tremor rippled through the camp. Nothing major, just enough to rattle the lanterns and unsettle the team. But afterward, the air inside the pit smelled faintly of ozone, sharp and electric. The geologist on site took readings. No seismic activity registered in the area. The ground hadn't moved. Something else had. That was the night Dr. Ortega began sleeping with her recorder on. You can still hear it if you find the archived tapes, the hum beneath the wind low and continuous growing slightly louder the closer she stands to the stone. When asked later what it was, she simply said, "It sounds like breathing." There's a documented historical fact buried here literally. The site, located near the Atacama Desert's dry basin, sits less than 15 kilometers from a known pre-Columbian trade route. Archaeological records confirm that no ancient settlements existed there, yet radiocarbon traces found in the soil predate known human activity in the region by nearly 2,000 years. A place uninhabited, but touched. A relic planted in silence long before any culture we can name. Some claim it's evidence of a proto-civilization, a forgotten precursor to recorded history. Others argue it's an anomaly, a natural formation mistaken for design. But there's one more theory quietly shared among researchers, that the burial wasn't an attempt to hide something new, but to keep something old from returning. You can't help but think of the way it was buried, not discarded, but entombed. Each layer pressed with purpose, as if whoever buried it believed silence itself was a seal. And if that's true, then unearthing it wasn't discovery. It was release. You remember the faint hum from before the whisper the stone made in your presence. It's stronger now, resonating somewhere just below your heartbeat. It's not loud, not yet, but you feel the vibration in your teeth. It's not wind. It's not machinery. It's something older. And if you listen carefully, really carefully, beneath the hum, there's a rhythm that doesn't belong to this place. 3 beats, a pause, then 2 more. Like a pulse learning to breathe again. The silence that followed its unearthing wasn't natural. It was protective. Because sometimes silence isn't absence, it's warning. By the second month after the excavation, the monolith had become more than just an archaeological anomaly. It had become an argument. Linguists, historians, and mathematicians all camped beneath the same flickering floodlights, each convinced that what they saw carved into the black surface belonged to their field. Yet no one could claim the whole. The inscriptions at first glance seemed familiar. Curved wedges evoked Sumerian cuneiform, while the looping geometric glyphs resembled Proto-Mayan script. Between them were delicate strokes spiraling upward like Sanskrit prayers, or perhaps just patterns pretending to be language. The surface wasn't random. The carvings followed a rhythm too precise to be chaos, too elegant to be coincidence. The deeper the researchers studied, the more impossible it became. How could a single stone contain symbols from civilizations separated by oceans, centuries, and entire worldviews? Chronicle. Ortega invited 2 of the world's leading epigraphers, Professor Hiroshi Tanaka from Kyoto and Dr. Isabel De Luca from Mexico City. They met under the glare of floodlights and argued in hushed, reverent tones. De Luca traced one of the spirals and whispered that it mirrored glyphs found in Palenque, the ancient Mayan city symbols used to describe the rebirth of gods. Tanaka disagreed, pointing to a set of marks that echoed early Jomon pottery, predating even Sumer by millennia. Both were right, and both were wrong. The most unnerving discovery came when they attempted to translate a sequence running along the slab's lower edge. The syntax made sense only when read simultaneously left to right and top to bottom, a structure unknown to any known writing system. When translated either way, the message remained coherent, yet subtly changed in tone, as if the stone could adapt to the reader's intent. Tanaka called it linguistic duality. De Luca preferred the phrase echo grammar. Ortega simply wrote in her notes, "It listens before it speaks." One evening, as a sandstorm rolled over the camp, lightning briefly illuminated the monolith. For a split second, every carved groove seemed to glow faintly blue like veins under skin. Later, analysis of photographs revealed faint phosphorescent residue traces of an unknown compound reactive to electrical charge. The inscriptions, it seemed, were designed to respond. Here lies a documented historical fact. The earliest known examples of cuneiform date to around 3200 BCE in Mesopotamia, while Proto-Mayan glyphs are believed to have emerged no earlier than 500 BCE. Between them at least 2,700 years, and yet here they shared the same slab carved with equal mastery. The physical impossibility was undeniable. Theoretical journals later described it as a trans-temporal linguistic convergence. In simpler terms, languages that never met somehow met here. And then came the obscure detail, one that almost no one outside the dig team ever heard about. When they magnified certain segments of the carvings under infrared light, a pattern emerged between the glyphs. Not scratches, not wear, but microscopic etchings invisible to the naked eye, like a secondary script woven between the primary one. These hidden markings didn't resemble any human language at all. Instead, they looked like data, a repeating binary rhythm carved thousands of years before binary was even conceived. The idea was dismissed quickly, of course. Dr. Ortega was warned not to mention it in her reports. Funding boards dislike anything that sounds like science fiction. But in her private recordings, she described hearing faint clicks whenever she stood close to the glowing script during a storm. "It's almost like a heartbeat trying to remember its own words," she said softly, voice barely above the wind. An ongoing debate rages even now. Some scholars argue the linguistic blending was a modern forgery, a hoax crafted to provoke academic scandal. Others insist it's a relic of a forgotten civilization that predated the Sumerians, a mother culture whose influence rippled through time like a language passed through dreams. One group, more quietly, suggests something stranger still, that the stone's inscriptions weren't carved by multiple cultures, but to them as if it had been rewritten across eras by unseen hands, updating itself for each new visitor who found it. The idea sounds absurd until you remember the residue found on its surface layers of carbon and mineral, each deposited centuries apart, each corresponding to a different historical era. It was as though the stone had been unearthed before spoken and buried again. You recall that faint vibration you felt when the stone first breathed. The same rhythm now thrums behind your eyes, soft and syncopated. You imagine the ancient scribes, each from different continents, standing before the same impossible monolith, each believing they were the first to understand it. Maybe they weren't translating the stone at all. Maybe it was translating them. There's something oddly human in that idea, the notion that knowledge might reach backward through time, teaching the past how to speak its own future. A cosmic echo looping endlessly through civilizations that thought they were original. You brush your fingertips over the imagined carvings, and for a fleeting instant your mind fills with voices, not words, not yet but tones, rising and falling in patterns that feel like thought. It isn't music, but it moves like it. It isn't language, but it understands you. You exhale. The hum inside your chest answers. The silence of the desert deepens. Somewhere beneath your feet, something ancient is listening, and perhaps for the first time in millennia beginning to reply. By the third month of excavation, the scientists agreed on only one thing: the stone refused to tell time properly. Every attempt to measure its age dissolved into contradiction. The samples came back like riddles, every test a different century, every century a different truth. You could say the monolith was playing with them, though no one dared to phrase it aloud. When the first set of carbon samples was taken from a residue lodged deep in the engraved lines, the results stunned the team. 9,000 BCE. That's older than Sumer, older than the wheel, older even than agriculture, older than history as we know it. The lab technicians ran the tests 3 more times, convinced contamination had skewed the data. But the readings were consistent. The organic material clinging to the stone was almost 11,000 years old. The impossible part wasn't just the date, it was the precision. The instruments calibrated to detect micro-variations showed no degradation consistent with age. The carbon fragments looked preserved as though time itself had politely stepped aside. And then came the second test: microscopic analysis of the tool marks along the carvings. The grooves were impossibly fine, carved with symmetrical depth, the kind of accuracy achieved only by high-speed rotary instruments. Except those didn't exist until the Bronze Age, nearly 7,000 years later. Dr. Ortega stared at the results for hours before finally muttering, "We're holding a stone that shouldn't exist in a world that wasn't ready for it." The lab reports were eventually classified, tucked beneath thick headers marked inconclusive. But one technician leaked an image, a high-resolution scan of one particular groove. When magnified 1,000 times, the cut revealed repeating micro-ridges, oscillations like those made by mechanical vibration. The implication was terrifyingly clear. Whatever had carved the stone used tools capable of operating at a frequency far beyond any known prehistoric technology. A well-established historical fact offers context here. The earliest evidence of advanced metalwork bronze smelting appeared around 3300 BCE during the rise of Mesopotamian city-states. Before that, humanity was still hammering copper by hand, shaping crude tools with stones. Yet the grooves on this monolith bore mechanical symmetry indistinguishable from 19th-century precision milling. The contradiction couldn't be ignored. It was as if someone from the future had left fingerprints in the past. Still, skeptics offered their usual explanations. They said perhaps the residue was from later contamination plant matter, lodged during flooding, or microbial life-forming biofilms that skewed the results. But the desert was too dry, too dead for such accidents. Others argued that natural geologic vibration might mimic tool marks. The rebuttal came swiftly. Nature doesn't carve in perfect spirals that align with the Fibonacci sequence. That was the obscure detail that sent a ripple through the scientific community. Hidden beneath the stone's surface texture in patterns invisible to the naked eye were grooves repeating the Fibonacci ratio, 1.618, over and over again, the same ratio found in DNA structure, nautilus shells, and galaxies. Nature uses that number, yes, but she doesn't carve it. Someone or something had replicated the blueprint of creation itself on a slab buried long before humans could even count. Late one night, while reviewing data under the dim glow of a desk lamp, Dr. Ortega recorded a private note. Her voice trembled slightly as she said, "The stone behaves like a clock that keeps resetting itself. Every test we run points to a different moment, like it's refusing to stay fixed in time. Maybe it's not from any single era. Maybe it's from all of them." The idea caught on, quietly whispered over coffee, shared in encrypted messages between labs. What if the monolith wasn't ancient in the traditional sense? What if it was timeless, an artifact that moved through epochs, absorbing and retaining traces from every era it touched? There's an ongoing scholarly debate about this phenomenon, now usually referred to as temporal saturation. Some physicists argue it's theoretically possible for certain crystalline structures to hold quantum imprints of environmental conditions, like a geological recording device. Others dismiss it as pseudoscience, the kind of theory that ruins careers. But even the skeptics can't explain why the carbon dating keeps changing, depending on where you touch the stone. Dr. Ortega tested that once. She collected samples from the same groove just a few centimeters apart. One came back as 9000 BCE, the other as 1200 CE, the age of the Crusades. She ran the tests again and again, until her colleagues begged her to stop. Eventually, she did. Not because she found an answer, but because the more she tested, the less she trusted the clock. You imagine her there alone in her tent, staring at that impossible slab beneath the stars. The desert quiets differently at night, a silence so complete it sounds like pressure on your eardrums. She must have wondered if the stone's hum was really just vibration, or if it was the sound of time itself struggling to stay in order. And you remember what she wrote earlier when it was first uncovered: this wasn't buried, it was silenced. Maybe the silence wasn't only to keep others from hearing it, but to keep the stone from speaking too soon. Because if it truly bends time, then every whisper it makes could echo forward or backward. You run your hand across the imagined surface, and for a moment, the world feels out of sync. Your breath doesn't quite match your heartbeat. The wind seems to pause between gusts like the air itself is recalibrating. And then it happens again, that faint, pulsing vibration. Not in the ground this time, but inside your bones. Like a clock ticking without hands counting something older than time itself. By the time the fourth round of tests was completed, no one slept near the monolith anymore. The hum that once whispered softly beneath the wind had changed no longer a pulse but a vibration that seemed to pass through everything it touched. Even the equipment trembled faintly at night, though seismic readings still reported nothing. The earth was steady. It was the stone that wasn't. Dr. Ortega finally requested a full geophysical survey. If something lay beneath the slab chamber's voids or supporting foundations, they needed to know. The seismic team arrived with ground-penetrating radar, expecting solid bedrock. Instead, what they found made even the stoic technicians fall silent. Beneath the stone, about 20 meters down the radar, returned echoes, smooth curved shapes, hollow yet geometrically precise. At first they thought it was a cave system, but natural caves don't form symmetrical arcs or reflect sound in harmonic waves. The data suggested deliberate design, a resonance chamber hidden below the monolith. A place built perhaps not to contain, but to amplify. The acoustic specialists set up tests placing sensors across the surface to capture vibrations. When a low-frequency tone was played a simple sound wave at 18 Hz, the stone responded. Not like an echo, not like reflection, but like reply. The sound didn't bounce, it deepened. Frequencies began to stack harmonics overlapping until a pattern emerged. The monolith was singing back. It wasn't music in the human sense. It was structure vibrations aligning into patterns that repeated at predictable intervals. And though the tones were subsonic, their rhythm carried something almost biological, like a heartbeat slowed to geological speed. Ortega described it later as the sound of memory learning to breathe. A well-established historical fact comes into focus here. Across the ancient world, megalithic structures, Stonehenge, the Hippogym of Malta, the Great Pyramid, share one remarkable feature: they resonate. Their chambers amplify specific frequencies linked to the human voice, particularly those between 95 and 120 Hz. Studies have shown these tones can trigger altered brain states, creating sensations of presence or awe. The monolith's frequency fell within that range exactly. Coincidence, perhaps, but a persuasive one. And then there was the obscure detail, the one omitted from official reports. During one of the tests, when the team adjusted the output frequency to mimic natural Earth vibrations, the sensors detected faint returns from beneath the ground. A second tone, impossibly soft, almost like a reply from below. When amplified, it revealed a strange modulation, 3 pulses, a pause, 2 pulses. The same rhythm recorded weeks earlier when the stone was first unearthed. The deeper they listened, the more distinct the pattern became. It was as though something beneath the monolith was using the stone as a voice. The resonance chambers mapped by seismic scan weren't random. They formed a spiral pattern mirroring the carvings on the surface. The structure below seemed designed to carry sound, not downward, but outward, as if broadcasting through the planet's crust itself. An ongoing scholarly debate continues to this day, where ancient civilizations aware of the Earth's natural resonances. Some argue they exploited the Schumann frequency, 7.83 Hz, the electromagnetic heartbeat of the planet. Others believe it's coincidence, the byproduct of architectural trial and error. But those who've studied the monolith claim the alignment is too perfect. It doesn't just resonate with the Earth, it resonates through it. The first night, the researchers played the tone that matched the Earth's natural frequency. The desert went unnaturally still. The wind dropped. Even the insects fell silent. Then faintly from somewhere below, a sound rose, a low, thrumming vibration that seemed to echo inside the chest rather than the ears. Several team members reported nausea, disorientation, and a strange sense of déjà vu. Dr. Ortega described it differently. It felt like the Earth was remembering something. One technician, young, superstitious, and half delirious from the heat, whispered that he heard voices beneath the tone. Not words, but the rhythm of speech, like 1,000 people murmuring in a language he almost recognized. He quit the next morning, refusing to stay another night. His bunk remained empty for the rest of the season. You imagine standing there yourself alone under the heavy sky. The floodlights flicker, their hum merging with that of the stone until you can't tell which is which. Beneath your boots, you sense depth, not emptiness, but pressure, like a lung held too long without breath. You wonder if the chambers below were built as instruments turning the Earth into a speaker. Or perhaps they were never built for us at all. Then comes the callback, the faint vibration you once felt, the heartbeat beneath your skin. It sinks again, aligning perfectly with the sound coming from the stone. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. The rhythm feels almost familiar now, like a code you've always known but never spoken aloud. You remember the languages that never met the patterns carved with impossible precision. Maybe this rhythm is the language, the original one, older than words, older than thought. When the generators finally shut down, the desert returns to silence. Yet the silence doesn't feel empty. It feels listening. The stars above seem sharper, colder. Somewhere below, the last echo lingers long after the instruments have stopped. And though you can't hear it anymore, your body still can. Every bone vibrates with the faint, lingering memory of a tone that isn't gone, only waiting. You exhale slowly. The ground answers. By the time linguists, physicists, and mathematicians all arrived to take their turn at the monolith, the excavation site had turned into something that felt more like a pilgrimage ground than a research camp. Floodlights burned through the night, surrounding the black stone like candles around an altar. Every expert who touched its surface found something different, a ratio, a rhythm, a code, something that seemed to speak directly to their field, as though the stone were adjusting its language to each mind that sought to read it. It was a young cryptographer, Dr. Kiran Patel, who first noticed the pattern. He wasn't even supposed to be there. He'd come to deliver data cables for the seismograph team. But as he stood before the monolith, eyes half-lidded in exhaustion, he realized the carvings weren't arranged randomly. The spacing between each symbol followed a recurring sequence, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, an unmistakable mathematical fingerprint. The Fibonacci ratio, again, the same golden proportion that governs shells, storms, galaxies, and even the spirals of DNA. At first, everyone laughed. It sounded too poetic, too convenient, like finding cosmic meaning in coincidence. But when Patel overlaid the ratios onto a digital rendering of the carvings, the alignment was undeniable. Every curve, every junction, every intersection matched the golden spiral's progression perfectly. The monolith wasn't merely inscribed, it was composed like music. Its symbols followed the same structural rhythm that underlies the growth of life itself. A well-documented historical fact ties this discovery to the past. Ancient Egyptian temples, the Parthenon of Athens, even Da Vinci's sketches, all employed the same ratio, the divine proportion, as if humanity kept rediscovering a truth already written into the world's geometry. But the monolith predated them all by millennia. Whoever carved it understood the pattern long before any known civilization did. The team brought in an imaging specialist from Geneva who used photogrammetry to analyze micro-variations across the surface. What she found deepened the mystery embedded within the larger Fibonacci structure was another sequence, a hidden oscillation between light and shadow, where the carved grooves shifted depth according to a ratio corresponding to the double helix twist angle, 34 degrees and 21 degrees. Those numbers in turn matched the geometry of DNA coiling. A coincidence so improbable, it forced everyone to stop pretending coincidence was a reasonable answer. The obscure detail emerged in Patel's private log, later leaked online in fragments. He wrote, "If the ratio of the carvings mirrors the structure of DNA, then the stone doesn't just record information, it may encode it. As if whoever made it wanted to remind us that the architecture of life and the architecture of thought come from the same source." Dr. Ortega was quieter after that. She began keeping her distance from the slab, though she often stood outside her tent long after the others slept, watching the floodlights shimmer against the surface. She told a colleague that when she looked at the carvings too long, she felt her heartbeat sinking to them, her pulse finding rhythm with the golden spiral, as though her own biology were answering back. Here, the ongoing scholarly debate turned strange. Some researchers claim the ratio is proof of human authorship, that it's an innate aesthetic, a reflection of how the human brain perceives harmony. Others believe it suggests a kind of universal language, one not invented, but discovered recurring wherever intelligence arises. But a smaller, more secretive circle inside the team proposed something far more unsettling. The monolith wasn't built by intelligence at all. It was built for it, a teaching device perhaps, a mirror showing life what it looks like from the outside. Patel, growing obsessed, fed the carving's coordinates into a pattern recognition algorithm. What came out wasn't language in the human sense, it was movement. The arrangement of symbols, when translated through frequency mapping, created a waveform identical to a harmonic found in certain megalithic temples. The same tone, the same pulse. The slab's design was sound made solid music, fossilized in stone. You remember the echo from before, the hum beneath your skin, the vibration that seemed to move through the air like breath. Now it clicks into place. The carvings aren't decoration, they're notation. The stone is an instrument. Late one evening, Patel claimed he'd cracked the ratio. He ran into Ortega's tent, wild-eyed, carrying pages of data. "It's not words," he said breathlessly, "it's instructions." The pattern, when converted into a time sequence rather than space, described a precise mathematical progression, something that resembled a tuning process, as if the monolith itself were waiting for a particular frequency to be played. They tried it. Using the acoustic data from earlier resonance tests, they generated a tone derived directly from the stone's own geometry. The sound that filled the desert was unlike anything the team had heard, low-layered, infinite. It wasn't loud, but it was everywhere. Cameras flickered. The floodlights dimmed. For 37 seconds, all electromagnetic equipment failed. When the systems returned, the carvings had changed. Not visibly, no new symbols, no fresh grooves, but the alignment of shadows had shifted. Lines that once ran parallel now curved subtly, forming a new pattern, as if the stone had listened and adjusted its design. Patel's last note before he left the site simply read, "It's responding." You stand before the imagined slab, now tracing the invisible ratio in your mind, feeling the pull of symmetry in every breath. The Fibonacci spiral isn't abstract anymore. It's alive, spiraling through your heartbeat, your cells, your very perception of time. You realize that maybe the stone wasn't trying to be understood. It was waiting for you to remember that you already did. And somewhere in that realization, deep beneath your ribs, the echo returns, steady, golden, infinite. 3 days after Patel disappeared, the camp was quiet. No one spoke of him aloud, but everyone moved differently, careful, subdued, as though a presence lingered between the tents. The monolith stood unchanged at the center, yet something about it felt altered. The air near it seemed denser, heavier, and the instruments, particularly those measuring electromagnetic variation, registered faint, rhythmic spikes. Dr. Ortega ordered the team to halt all acoustic experiments. "We listen only," she said. No transmission. But the listening was what changed everything. That evening, when the last of the sun fell behind the dunes, the static returned. It wasn't the desert wind nor any kind of radio interference. It was structured bursts of rhythm grouped in repeating patterns. 3 pulses. Pause. 2 pulses. The same ancient rhythm again. At first, the signal came faintly through the seismic sensors. Then, over the next hours, it began appearing across every instrument, thermal cameras, radio antennas, even light spectrometers. Each recorded the same sequence at perfectly identical intervals. The signal wasn't traveling through air or even through the earth. It was propagating through everything at once. A well-documented scientific fact supports this electromagnetic resonance can synchronize across distant mediums when frequencies align, exactly a principle used in quantum communication. But the readings here went beyond physics. The signal was too stable, too self-correcting. It didn't decay over distance. It grew. An obscure detail surfaced in one of Ortega's nightly reports, never released officially, but cited later in the classified Carat 9 memo. She wrote, "The signal behaves like an organism. It adapts. It learns. The more we measure it, the stronger it becomes. I don't think it's transmitting data, I think it's scanning." The ongoing scholarly debate since then has divided the field. Some argue the monolith functions as a geological resonator, a natural amplifier of the planet's electromagnetic pulse. Others, fewer but louder, insist it's a form of communication. Not outbound, but inbound, that it isn't sending signals to us, but through us. The breakthrough came at 2:37 a.m. on a windless night. The main frequency monitor lit up with a sustained tone, the longest yet. As the researchers scrambled to record, the signal's harmonics began to modulate, forming distinct intervals. One of the technicians, a musician before joining the expedition, froze. "It's a chord," he whispered. "It's tuned." He was right. The frequencies matched the harmonic ratios of perfect fifths, 1, 1.5, 2, 3. a structure used across all known musical systems from Gregorian chants to Mongolian throat singing. The monolith was broadcasting harmony itself, the mathematical backbone of beauty and stability. But then came the obscure anomaly. Hidden within those harmonics was a faint sideband modulation, a subtle warble that, when slowed by a factor of 1,000,000, produced a waveform identical to a human heartbeat. Ortega ordered silence. Every generator, every instrument shut off. The camp sank into darkness. The only sound was the slow breathing of the desert wind. And beneath it, so faint it might have been imagination, the pulse continued. You picture yourself there standing before the black surface, one hand outstretched. The air hums faintly, pressing against your skin, not like sound, but like thought. Each beat in the air matches your own pulse. You try to pull away, but the rhythm follows. It's not echoing you, it's syncing with you. Ortega's final recorded words, captured on the expedition's voice log, remain among the most analyzed phrases in modern archaeology. It's not a signal. It's an invitation. After that night, the monolith fell silent. The rhythmic interference stopped. Instruments returned to normal. The team packed up within a week. Officially, the report listed geological anomaly unverified. The site was buried again under layers of sand. And yet months later, researchers monitoring unrelated seismic data in 3 separate continents reported identical patterns. 3 pulses, pause, 2 pulses. Each originating not from the surface but from deep within the crust, at depths exceeding any known fault or structure. The signal hadn't stopped. It had moved inward. A forgotten note from Patel found in his abandoned tent said simply, "The slab wasn't calling us. It was waking itself. You feel it now, the faint tremor beneath your own heartbeat, the resonance hidden in the silence between breaths." Maybe the monolith was never a message at all. Maybe it's the memory of something that once spoke through the earth itself, still whispering, waiting for the next listener to align. And as you imagine that ancient rhythm rising again, you can't help but wonder if the stone is a transmitter. What happens when the planet finally replies? Months later, after the official closure of the dig, you find yourself in a quiet corner of a European museum, the kind that smells faintly of dust and policies. The halls stretch endlessly, lined with artifacts that all claim to know something about the past. Yet most of them, you suspect, only remember the stories written for them. You're here chasing a rumor, a fragment mislabeled, forgotten, and sealed behind glass. Dr. Ortega's field notes had mentioned a single discrepancy in the registry, a sliver of basalt catalogued decades before the monolith's discovery, showing identical carvings along its edge. The location, the Lentz collection, a private archive quietly absorbed by the State Museum in the early 1970s. The tag read simply, "Unknown Object, Northern Mesopotamia Cuneiform Variant." But the carvings weren't cuneiform, not even close. Standing before the glass case, you feel the same hum you once felt in the desert. Faint, pulsing, almost too slow to notice, but present. The fragment itself is small, no larger than your hand, yet its pattern matches perfectly the monolith's curvature. It's not a copy. It's a broken edge. A historical fact gives the moment its eerie precision. In 1871, a German expedition under archaeologist Friedrich Kaltmann documented an unclassified stone near the Tigris River. His sketches, preserved in the Berlin Academy archives, show markings indistinguishable from those on the monolith. Kaltmann's report vanished after his death in 1874, along with several crates of geological curiosities. Only fragments of his correspondence remain, including one cryptic line. "The stone does not wish to be found twice." Now, staring at the fragment in front of you, you understand why. The museum's record indicates it was acquired from an anonymous donor in 1973, right after a flood destroyed half the Lentz estate's private library. A coincidence that feels too convenient. Even more peculiar is the note appended to the accession file, Provenance under review. Restricted access pending governmental verification. You can almost hear the bureaucracy whispering, "Bury it again." The obscure detail comes from a retired curator named Hans Leverke, who still visits the museum cafe every Thursday. Over lukewarm tea, he leans close and says the fragment was tested once unofficially using laser interferometry. The results showed micro-oscillations across its surface vibrations, consistent with low-frequency resonance. When the data was sent to the Ministry for verification, the instruments used were confiscated for calibration. He smiles sadly as he says it, then adds, they were never returned. Scholars still argue about why such artifacts occasionally hum or vibrate when exposed to certain conditions. Some blame environmental acoustics or magnetic interference. Others whisper about piezoelectric minerals or hidden crystalline lattices reacting to pressure. Yet no one can explain how an inert piece of rock can mimic the rhythmic pattern of the Schumann resonance, the planet's own electromagnetic heartbeat, without being powered by anything at all. As you stand before the glass, the room's temperature drops slightly. You feel the faintest tremor underfoot, subtle enough that no one else notices. The air thickens, almost charged, and for a fleeting second, the faint museum lighting flickers 3 times, pause twice. That same pattern again. You exhale a soft laugh, escaping before you can stop it. You followed me, you whisper, half joking, half afraid. You're right. The callback is impossible to ignore. You remember the tones that echoed through the desert, the strange harmony that matched your pulse. You remember Patel's note, the way Ortega stared at the oscillograph and whispered, "It's scanning." Now here it is, again reduced, hidden, half buried behind glass, but unmistakably alive. You lean closer, eyes tracing the carvings along the broken edge. The fragment seems to shimmer faintly, as if light bends differently against its surface. And in that shimmer, you almost see movement like ripples on still water. You blink and it's gone, but the hum remains. Later, you find yourself in the museum archives, flipping through carbon-faded letters brittle with age. One folder, stamped confidential, contains a single photograph, grainy, blurred, showing the fragment before it was encased. Scrawled on the back in Kaltmann's handwriting are 5 words, "The rest lies below Paris." A scholar might dismiss it as romantic nonsense. But then again, the museum sits directly above one of the most intricate underground systems in the world, the Paris catacombs. And if Kaltmann was right, perhaps the fragment wasn't the only piece moved here. Perhaps the rest of the monolith's body, those hollow chambers detected under the desert, wasn't the only structure ever built. You think of those chambers resonant and hidden, and how the earth itself seemed to sing. You imagine a network of stones beneath the cities of the modern world, each fragment vibrating softly, waiting to connect again. Before leaving, you glance one last time at the fragment. In the reflection of the glass, the carvings seem to align perfectly with your own silhouette, the edges matching the curve of your jaw, the slope of your shoulders. You step back, heart slowing, because for a second, it feels as if the stone recognizes you. When you walk out, the museum clock ticks twice, pauses, then ticks 3 times. You don't check the time again. That night in your hotel room, you dream of corridors beneath Paris, endless tunnels lit by the pulse of buried stones, and somewhere among them, the faint voice of Ortega murmuring, "It's not transmitting data, it's learning the language of stone." When you wake, your phone vibrates on the nightstand 3 times, pause 2 times. No message follows. just the soft, lingering hum of something that refuses to be forgotten. You don't go back to the museum. Not yet. Instead, you travel east, following a new lead. One whispered by a retired acoustician from Geneva who once studied the resonance of ancient temples. She'd written you a short message after hearing of the monolith, "If the stone sings, listen where the old gods spoke." That's how you find yourself in a highland valley, far from cities where sound carries with unsettling clarity. The local villagers call the ridge La Voix des Morts, the voice of the dead. They say when the wind moves a certain way, the mountains hum. You arrive with a portable frequency generator and an unreasonable hope that something here might respond. The rock formations across the ridge match almost perfectly the curvature of the monolith's surface. Same basalt composition, same silica density. You place a microphone near one of the natural pillars, switch on the generator, and feed a slow, low oscillation through the air. The stone shivers faintly, then impossibly it answers. The sound that returns isn't echo. It's layered tones rising and falling like breath, a deep harmonic pulse that vibrates in your ribs. You recognize it instantly, the same resonance as the slab buried in the desert, the same 3-beat rhythm, the same pause, the same return. You record for hours, adjusting frequencies, shifting positions, trying to isolate the response. But what happens next defies every rule of acoustics. The stones begin to synchronize not just with your generator, but with each other. You can feel the vibrations moving across the ridge, one pillar to the next, as if a conversation is taking place through the mountain. There's a historical precedent that makes your skin crawl. In the 1990s, researchers discovered that the hypogeum of Hal Saflieni in Malta, a subterranean temple over 5,000 years old, produced standing waves at 111 Hz, capable of vibrating the human skull cavity and altering perception. Ancient builders didn't stumble upon this by chance. Their architecture was tuned. And now, here you are watching the same principle unfold, not from chambers carved by hand, but through stone shaped by time itself. The obscure discovery comes when you replay your recordings that night. Hidden beneath the audible frequencies, your spectrogram reveals faint harmonics outside human hearing range, precisely at 7.83 Hz. The Schumann resonance again. But embedded within that waveform, a modulation 3 pulses, pause 2 pulses translates, when slowed and inverted, into something impossible, a melodic phrase. It's crude, haunting, but undeniably musical. 5 notes. 3 descending, 2 ascending. You hum it under your breath without meaning to, and for a moment the mountains seem to respond. The ongoing scholarly debate reignites in your mind. Could ancient cultures have used infrasound intentionally? Resonances meant not to be heard, but felt. Some argue the builders of Stonehenge, Tiwanaku, and Göbekli Tepe aligned their monuments along geomagnetic nodes, turning entire landscapes into harmonic instruments. Others dismiss the theory as mysticism. Yet when you hear the earth's bones sing back to you, mysticism begins to sound like measurement waiting for language. That night, you camp near the ridge. The stars burn clear, cold, and near. Every few minutes, the ground hums a long, low tremor that fades like breath. In your dreams, you're back before the monolith. But this time, its surface ripples with sound, every carving vibrating to a rhythm your body recognizes, but your mind refuses to name. You wake to silence. Your recording device blinks a steady light. The display shows new data files you didn't record, timestamps matching the moments you were asleep. You play one. It begins with static, then faintly a tone, slow, deep, and human-shaped. Beneath it, a second tone, a harmonic counterpoint. and then layered over both a whisper so soft it could be breath, "You are hearing us now." The logical part of your mind insists it's interference overlapping frequencies, the audio artifact of wind and sleep. But the cadence of those words, it's the same as Patel's last radio message before he vanished, the same clipped rhythm that haunted your data. You play it again, over and over, but the voice fades each time as if it knows it's being studied. The callback hits you mid-thought. In the desert, the monolith had responded to frequency tests with tonal variations. The vibrations had formed harmonic intervals, perfect fifths, octaves. You'd assumed it was mechanical resonance. But now you hear the same intervals across continents echoed in natural rock. The implication is unbearable. Whatever force animated that stone isn't confined to one place. It moves through the earth like sound through bone. By dawn, the ridge falls silent again. You collect your equipment, though part of you hesitates. You hum the 5-note phrase one last time before you leave, and as you turn away, a faint vibration travels up your spine like an answer, quiet and certain. There's an old superstition among sound engineers: never listen too long to a tone that listens back. You finally understand why. When you reach the nearest town, you check your files once more. The last recording ends abruptly, not with static or silence, but with the unmistakable sound of stone grinding against stone, slow, deliberate, heavy, as if something deep within the mountain had just shifted, opening a space that hadn't moved in thousands of years. You close the file. You don't press play again. But that night, as you lie in bed, the melody returns on its own 5 notes, 3 descending, 2 rising. You realize you're not humming it this time. You're hearing it, and somewhere beneath the city streets, the ground hums back. You return home with hours of recordings, fragments of data, and one haunting melody that refuses to fade. Weeks pass before you dare analyze them all together. When you finally do, something strange emerges: a visual rhythm hidden within the frequencies. You transfer the sound data into a spectrogram, expecting the usual jagged chaos of geological noise. Instead, you find shape. Curves, intersecting lines, and angular nodes that seem almost deliberate. At first you think it's pareidolia, human pattern recognition, at its most desperate. But when you overlay the geometry onto a world map, the alignment is too exact to ignore. Each harmonic spike corresponds to a known archaeological site: the Great Pyramid of Giza, Stonehenge, the Nazca Lines, the Pyramid of the Sun, and the ancient city of Nan Madol. The pattern forms a sprawling lattice, an invisible web connecting continents. One confirmed historical fact makes your breath catch. Every site in that alignment has recorded unexplained acoustic properties. The King's Chamber resonates at 117 Hz. Stonehenge amplifies tones at 110. The Sun Pyramid hums with low-frequency standing waves measurable even today. The Earth's most ancient monuments, scattered across time and ocean, share one impossible similarity: they sing in tune. The obscure detail arrives from an unexpected direction. Deep in the archives of an old French journal, Les Études Géométriques, you find a forgotten paper by a mathematician named Aimé Delard. Written in 1924, it describes a harmonic geodesy, a hypothetical system by which ancient builders could have mapped the globe through sonic interference, using resonance patterns, to locate structurally stable points. The theory was dismissed as pseudoscience at the time. Delard died in obscurity, yet his coordinates, when cross-checked against your map, align perfectly with the monolith's frequency data. A debate still rages among historians and geophysicists. Did ancient civilizations possess a unified system of measurement, a shared geometry that predated written language? Some argue the repetition of ratios, the golden mean pi phi, was purely aesthetic. Others insist it was knowledge encoded in architecture, preserved like DNA. And now you're staring at a digital ghost of that knowledge pulsing on your screen, daring you to draw the final line. You zoom in, overlaying each point again, watching as the network forms a spiral across the planet's surface, beginning in the deserts of northern Mesopotamia, where the monolith was found, and curling outward through continents and seas. When the final connection locks the spiral ends at a single coordinate in the Pacific Ocean, thousands of miles from any landmass. You check the coordinate twice, then a third time. It corresponds to a ridge deep beneath the seafloor part of an underwater trench, known for inexplicable magnetic anomalies. The Navy logged strange sonar feedback there in the 1970s. Repeating pulses, symmetrical interference patterns, 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. You whisper the phrase aloud without meaning to the voice beneath the water. As you listen again to your recordings, the callback becomes impossible to ignore. The 5-note melody that once came from the mountain contains not just tone but timing. When translated into geographic intervals, the rhythm matches the spacing between the ancient sites themselves. The song isn't music, it's a map. The monolith didn't mark a location. It encoded a network. You imagine the implications. Perhaps these stones weren't monuments, but nodes, part of a planetary architecture built to resonate across millennia. The acoustic frequencies might not just travel through air, but through the crust itself, connecting these places like tuning forks spread across the world. If so, then activating one might awaken them all. You test the theory late one night, feeding the 5-note pattern through your software, assigning each frequency to its corresponding site. When the tones play together, they merge into a slow, deep, harmonic hum, rich, layered, and strangely peaceful. But then, unexpectedly, your screen flickers. The signal strength spikes. A faint interference crawls across the spectrum analyzer. For a moment, you hear the echo of your own heartbeat, perfectly synchronized with the sound. It shouldn't be possible. Your speakers aren't connected to any external network. Yet the signal grows stronger. You cut power. The sound continues for 3 seconds after the system dies, fading only when total silence returns. You sit in the dark, realizing you've just triggered something larger than your machine could contain. The historical debate flashes again in your mind, those who claimed the ancient builders measured Earth not by stars, but by sound. Perhaps they weren't guessing. Perhaps they understood that resonance is memory, that vibration is the only language that survives both fire and time. Maybe this is how knowledge was stored, when words were still being invented through stones that could remember a note. Later that week, you receive a message from Dr. Ortega, sent from an encrypted address you didn't know she still used. The email is brief, they've found another. Coordinates attached. It's under ice. You don't reply. You simply open the file. The location points to Antarctica near a ridge buried under 3 kilometers of frozen silence. The spiral on your map now completes itself, looping back to where the Earth's crust is oldest. You realize then that the pattern isn't random, nor is it human. It's planetary. For a long moment, you stare at the glowing spiral. The rhythm of your pulse matches the 3-beat pattern again. The melody hums faintly in your chest. You wonder if this is how the first listeners felt, the ones who carved the symbols before time had a name. When you close your laptop, the room is utterly still. Yet in that stillness, the walls seem to breathe. The faintest tremor ripples through the floorboards, so subtle you'd miss it if you weren't listening for it. You wait, holding your breath, and then you hear it, distant, soft, but clear as memory. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. The world is answering itself. When the expedition request comes, you don't hesitate. Funding appears through channels no one will name. Equipment clearance transport all arranged in days. You're told only this: you're being sent as an observer. The site is classified as geophysical, not archaeological. You recognize the phrasing. It means they're scared of what they've found. The journey south feels like descending through layers of silence. As the aircraft crosses the Antarctic Circle, even the engines seem to muffle. The horizon dissolves into an endless mirror of ice and light. You land on a plateau where wind never stops moving, carving whispers into the snow. At the base camp, the scientists are tense. Their eyes avoid one another, as if conversation itself might summon something. You notice the generators emit a faint rhythmic pulse: 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. The same pattern. You ask a technician about it. He says it's interference from below the ice, though they haven't yet reached the structure. The excavation site lies 2 kilometers away, surrounded by radar equipment and floodlights that never go dark. Beneath the translucent blue, a shadow waits, rectangular, colossal, and far too geometric to be natural. On the 3rd day, the ice yields. A laser drill opens a narrow shaft, releasing a sound no one expected. Not a crack, but a low resonant note deep as thunder beneath the sea. It vibrates through your teeth. Every compass in the camp spins wildly for a full minute. The structure they reveal isn't stone this time. It's crystal clear as glass, etched with lines that glow faintly in the dark. A frozen cathedral buried for millions of years. The walls shimmer with shifting light like auroras trapped in glass. But the carvings are familiar, the same spirals, the same geometric language found on the desert monolith. One of the scientists, a linguist named Chandra, brings up a chilling correlation. She's been comparing symbols across global artifacts: Göbekli Tepe, the Indus, seals, the Mayan codices. The syntax isn't human, she whispers. It's harmonic. Every curve corresponds to a vibration frequency. It's not writing, it's music translated into form. That night you're invited to descend into the shaft. The air grows colder with every meter until breath crystallizes mid-air. At the bottom, floodlights reveal the entrance to a chamber shaped like a spiral shell. The walls pulse faintly, reacting to sound. When you speak, the echo doesn't bounce, it bends. You test a recording, 5 tones, the melody from the mountain. The moment it plays, the walls come alive. Light ripples outward in waves, forming intricate patterns that twist and fold into each other, as if the structure itself is remembering something. Then the pulse begins, slow at first, then faster until it synchronizes perfectly with your heartbeat. You drop the recorder. The lights respond to that too, flaring in rhythm with your pulse. It's not responding to the sound anymore. It's responding to you. Chandra whispers from behind, voice trembling. It's alive in resonance. You're part of the circuit. And then the crystal beneath your feet glows white. A column of light erupts upward, piercing the ice. For a fraction of a second, you see beyond the chamber into something vast and dark, like the memory of the planet itself. Voices hum in frequencies too low to be human, overlapping in chords that form a single impossible phrase. Memory is structure. Structure is sound. Every sensor in camp fries simultaneously. When you regain consciousness, hours have passed. The lights are gone. The chamber is cold, again silent as before. But the recordings you made now contain something new. A whisper under the tone, repeating in slow intervals, almost like coordinates. You try to isolate the sound, later filtering the noise. The numbers emerge clearly, one by one, ending with an elevation that shouldn't exist. It points below sea level at the exact center of the Pacific Spiral. The same ridge. The team wants to classify the finding and move on. But you know, this is no coincidence. The monoliths, the song, the ice, all parts of one design. A network built before civilization itself, perhaps even before humanity. Before leaving Antarctica, you stand one last time at the mouth of the shaft. The wind howls through the opening, producing a tone almost too low to hear. But if you listen carefully beneath the wind, beneath your heartbeat, you can hear it forming the same rhythm again. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. You whisper into the wind. What are you? For the first time, something whispers back. The beginning that remembers its end. The air stills. The hum fades. And somewhere deep beneath the ice, something shifts as if awakening after a very long dream. You can't sleep after Antarctica. The hum still lives somewhere behind your ears, like the echo of a thought that isn't yours. Every time you close your eyes, you see the crystal chamber pulsing with light, replaying that phrase, memory is structure. Structure is sound. When you return to the research center, the director greets you like someone who's already seen too much. He gestures to a locked case on the table. Inside, fragments of the original monolith still marked by the impact of the early excavation. The air around them seems heavier, as though carrying more gravity than the room should hold. We've begun translating the outer inscriptions, he says. You'll want to see this yourself. The slabs are laid flat beneath low light. At first glance, the carvings appear decorative spirals within spirals radiating outward like waves. But under magnification, they reveal minuscule etchings between the lines, microscopic text, written in parallel. You focus on the translation that's been reconstructed so far. The words flow like prophecy. When the sky forgets its name and the rivers turn to mirrors, silence will return to measure the living. No one in the room speaks. The silence that follows feels rehearsed, as if every person there has practiced not reacting. The linguist Chandra breaks first. She explains that this passage, what she calls Cycle 12, appears in dozens of other fragments worldwide, from temple ruins in Crete to obsidian tablets found in Guatemala. Always the same structure, always the same warning, an event described as the forgetting. You ask what the forgetting means. She looks at you like someone remembering something painful. The closest linguistic root suggests it isn't about losing knowledge, she says softly. It's about the world losing memory itself, like reality resets. The text describes a kind of selective erasure. Civilizations collapse not by destruction, but by forgetting that they ever existed. It sounds absurd, yet you recall the data anomalies from the previous expeditions. Lost records, dates shifting, entire dig sites that vanish from satellite archives. Could that be the mechanism of the forgetting rewriting not of stone or sand, but of memory itself? Later that night, you review old notes from the Antarctic base. The coordinates whispered through the crystal still point to the same place, a deep ridge in the Pacific. But there's a new line of data in the file, an audio waveform recorded hours after you left the chamber. It's faint, almost buried in static, but when amplified, you hear the same rhythmic pattern you thought you'd escaped. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. This time, though, there are words beneath it. A human voice. Yours. You listen again, certain it's an illusion, but the spectrogram confirms it, your own vocal signature, repeating a phrase you never said aloud. The cycle closes when you remember. You play it once more slowly. The pitch fluctuates, then stabilizes into that harmonic hum from the chamber. You realize the stone wasn't merely resonating with sound. It was recording through vibration, imprinting the voices of those who stood before it. If that's true, then perhaps these warnings are not prophecies at all, but reminders, messages, sent to future versions of ourselves. The next morning, you bring your findings to the director. He listens quietly, then nods. "There's something you need to read," he says, handing you a folder stamped 1897 AE Cartwright Expedition. Inside, yellowed papers detail an explorer's descent into a singing cavern in the Peruvian Andes. Cartwright's notes mention a voice in the stone warning of silence. His handwriting deteriorates near the end, the final line barely legible. The voice said, "It was me before I became." A carbon copy of his journal entry includes a symbol in the margin, the same spiral pattern that appears on both the monolith and the Antarctic crystal. The connection is undeniable now. But then comes the detail that chills everyone in the room. Cartwright vanished in 1898. No body, no remains, no trace. His expedition team returned with partial amnesia, each recalling the journey differently. Some insisted they never went to Peru at all. Others remembered only the sound of wind in a tunnel that hummed their names. It's then that Chandra whispers, almost too quietly to hear, "What if the forgetting has already started?" No one answers. The fluorescent light above you flickers once, then steadies. For a moment, you feel something dislodge in your memory, a fragment slipping away like ice breaking from a shore. What color was the base camp tent, red or blue, you can't recall. Outside, a storm rolls in from the coast. Thunder rumbles across the horizon, deep and slow, like the sound from beneath the Antarctic ice. It seems to echo the rhythm again. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. You stand by the window watching lightning stretch across the dark. It flashes against your reflection, and for a heartbeat, the glass distorts your outline, replaced by a faint silhouette of stone. You blink. It's gone. Behind you, Chandra speaks one final time. If the stone remembers everything she says, then maybe forgetting is just what happens when we stop listening. You think about that as rain begins to fall, tapping softly against the window pane. The sound is almost like whispering. Each drop seems to carry the same message over and over, as though the world itself is trying to remind you before it's too late. The cycle closes when you remember, and somewhere deep beneath the sea, the ridge begins to hum. You don't remember falling asleep? You only remember waking to the sound of static, the soft crackle of a transmission that shouldn't exist. It comes from your recorder, the same one you used in the Antarctic chamber, though you're sure it was turned off. The light flickers weakly as if struggling to stay alive. You press play. At first there's nothing but low hum and faint interference. Then under the static, a whisper forms. It's your voice again, but speaking words you've never said. Archive online. Sequence initiated. The tone is mechanical, emotionless, yet the cadence is undeniably yours. You send the file to a data lab for analysis. Their AI tool, an advanced linguistic synthesis model, breaks the waveform into fragments looking for hidden structure. An hour later, the lead researcher calls his voice thin with disbelief. It's not just sound, he says, it's code. The frequencies encode a data matrix far denser than any analog format could hold. And get this, the structure resembles biological sequencing, like DNA. Your breath catches. The connection feels impossible and inevitable all at once. DNA sound structure. The same triad the stone has been whispering since the beginning. The AI continues decoding through the night. You sit beside the screen watching symbols bloom into recognizable patterns, spirals, lattices repeating geometric forms. Slowly, an image resolves an enormous ring surrounding a spiral core, radiating outward like a galaxy mapped in miniature. But it's no star chart. The coordinates embedded within the pattern trace ancient archaeological sites across continents from the Indus Valley to the Nazca Desert, each linked by harmonic frequency. Chandra arrives at dawn, eyes hollow but alert. She stares at the projection and murmurs, "It's not a monument. It's a memory system." You ask her to explain. The carvings, the tones, the resonance, they're all part of an information lattice, she says, pacing slowly. It's like a backup drive for the planet. Not written in language, but encoded in matter itself. Every vibration, every geometric form stores data. The stone isn't ancient, it's timeless. It records by existing. The phrase "record by existing" sends a chill through you. If the monoliths are archives, then what are they preserving and who or what recorded them in the first place? The AI finishes parsing one final layer of code and produces a translated segment. The words crawl across the screen like prophecy when the voice beneath returns, "Seek the quiet place." The archive will open when all tongues fall silent. Silence again. Then the system crashes the projection, dissolving into a single line of static. On the spectrogram, that static forms a faint pattern: 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. You don't even flinch anymore. Over the following days, you and Chandra piece together everything the AI decoded before failing. The fragments refer to an origin structure that predates recorded history, a central node described as the cradle below the waves. You remember the Antarctic coordinates, the ridge and the Pacific. Every clue leads there. The director resists the idea of returning, citing geopolitical constraints. You realize he's afraid, not of discovery, but of confirmation. If the stone truly records reality, then every lie humanity tells might already be stored somewhere, carved into the fabric of existence itself. You return to your quarters, restless. You try to write your field notes, but find entire paragraphs missing. Your handwriting trails off mid-sentence, replaced by symbols you don't remember writing. Spirals, concentric waves, the same ones from the crystal. That night you dream of standing on the ocean floor. The water isn't cold, it's dense, almost breathable. Around you rise countless stone pillars, glowing faintly, vibrating in slow harmony. Each emits a fragment of sound together, forming a single vast chord that feels like the heartbeat of the planet. You reach out to touch one pillar, and the instant your hand connects, the sound shifts into a voice. You are not the listener, it says. You are the memory being heard. You wake in darkness, drenched in sweat, the echo still ringing in your ears. The clock on the wall has stopped frozen at 3:12 a.m. You check your recorder again, and there it is, another new file recorded while you slept. The timestamp reads 3:12. The audio plays back a faint whisper, your dream word for word. For a moment, panic takes hold. How could a device capture something that never happened outside your mind? Unless the stone, its resonance, has already synchronized with you. Unless you have become part of the archive. You remember what Chandra said, it records by existing. Maybe you're no longer just observing history. Maybe you're contributing to it. At dawn, you step outside. The wind carries a strange sound, not quite human, not mechanical, something in between. It seems to follow the rhythm of your heartbeat, adjusting as you breathe. The morning light flickers oddly, as if refracted by something unseen. You whisper, "If this is an archive, what are you preserving?" The sound deepens, almost like laughter beneath the earth. Then it fades into a phrase so faint, you could mistake it for imagination. The story before stories. You know now what must come next. The ridge beneath the Pacific, the cradle below the waves, must be the final chamber, the place where all the resonance converges. The stone has led you from earth to ice, from silence to sound. But this feels different. It feels like returning to the origin itself. You close your notebook. Outside, the wind hums softly, 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. And for the first time, the rhythm feels less like a warning and more like a heartbeat, ancient, patient, waiting for someone to remember. You arrive at the Pacific aboard a vessel disguised as a marine research ship. The official mission to collect sediment samples from the ocean floor. The real purpose to follow the coordinates whispered by the stone, the cradle beneath the waves. The sea is calm that day, unnaturally, so like a mirror holding its breath. Even the gulls are absent, their absence somehow louder than their cries would have been. Chandra stands beside you on deck, her hair whipping in the salt wind. Neither of you speak for a long time. It feels wrong to. Beneath your feet, the instruments hum with that same pulse, 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. You both pretend not to notice. The sonar operator breaks the silence first. "We're over the site," he says, his voice trembling. "Depth 10, 800 meters. The Mariana level depth shouldn't be reachable with your equipment, but the readings insist it's possible. The seafloor there forms a spiral trench, perfectly symmetrical, radiating from a central point, like a fingerprint pressed into the earth. As the submersible begins its descent, you watch through the glass as sunlight vanishes layer by layer. The water grows darker, denser, until the only illumination comes from the vessel's lamps. Yet even they seem swallowed by the black. Pressure groans around you like an enormous heartbeat. 5,000 meters down, the interference begins. Instruments flicker. Audio feeds burst into static. And then through the static, the sound emerges, a tone too deep to be made by any machine. It reverberates through the hull, into your chest, into your bones. Chandra's lips move, but no sound comes out. The microphones register her words anyway. It's calling. The descent continues. At 10,790 meters, the ocean floor materializes out of darkness, not barren rock, but smooth glass-like stone curving in vast concentric patterns. At the center lies an opening, circular and perfectly defined. You realize it matches the crystal chamber beneath Antarctica. A reflection, a second gate. The submersible hovers above it, and then without command, the control panel flickers and the engines shut down. You begin to drift slow and deliberate toward the center. When the hull makes contact, the vibrations cease. A light spreads outward from beneath the vessel, pale and golden, illuminating the trench for kilometers. You see structures, columns, bridges, impossible architecture grown from the seafloor itself. The scale defies reason. Every surface is covered in carvings, glowing faintly, pulsing in rhythm. Chandra presses her hand to the glass. "It's breathing," she whispers. You hear it then. Not through speakers, not through metal, but directly inside your skull. A voice made of vibration, calm and vast, older than sound itself. It doesn't speak in words, but in meaning, and yet you understand every thought as though it were your own. You have reached the root of remembrance. The light intensifies, filling the submersible, wrapping you in warmth that feels both alien and familiar. We were the makers, the listeners, the dreamers of form. We carved the archive before time so that what was known could never be lost. When worlds forgot, the record endured. When silence came, the sound remembered. You struggle to breathe, not from fear, but awe. The voice continues unfolding like a melody that reshapes the air. Each age builds its echo, each echo decays. When the forgetting begins, those who hear are drawn to restore the pattern. You are not chosen. You are remembered. The meaning strikes you like lightning, humanity isn't the first to walk this path. Every cycle the stone calls a listener. Every cycle the listener awakens the archive, ensuring the continuity of memory before the next silence. You ask, or think you ask, why me? The voice responds, soft as tide against sand. Because you listened. A blinding radiance bursts from the seafloor. The submersible systems reboot screens flooding with impossible data. Sonar images show not one structure but thousands vast lattices of stone and light, stretching beneath every ocean. An entire global network lying dormant until now. The map fills with dots, each pulsing in the same rhythm: 3 beats, pause, 2 beats. The voice lowers to a whisper. The archive awakens through remembrance. Do not seek to control it. Let the world remember itself. Chandra's eyes glisten. She mouths the words as if reciting a prayer. It's alive, she says. The whole planet it's remembering. The light begins to fade. The submersible drifts upward, guided by a current that shouldn't exist. As you rise, the pressure lessens, and the sea around you glows faintly, threads of bioluminescent energy spiraling like galaxies underwater. Hours later, you break the surface. The ocean is calm again. Stars scatter across the night sky, their reflections shimmering on the water. You realize they form the same spiral pattern as the trenches below. The memory above mirrors the memory below. Chandra looks at you, voice barely audible. If the world remembers, what happens to those who forget? You don't answer. Somewhere inside you know the truth. The cycle doesn't end. It restarts. The archive waits until silence falls again. As dawn rises, a faint hum rolls through the sea, gentle, rhythmic, endless. 3 beats. Pause. 2 beats. The sound of a planet remembering itself. The ship drifts aimlessly for days. You lose track of time. Sunrise and sunset blend together until the sky feels like one endless sheet of amber light. The hum beneath the waves never stops. It's softer now, gentler, like a heartbeat slowing after a long run. You don't know whether it's the planet calming or simply beginning again. When the translation finally completes, it appears not as sound, but as light. The fragments from every site, the desert slab, the crystal chamber, the Pacific Ridge combine into one coherent message. It plays silently across the monitor, a final phrase carved in living code. The silence that comes is not the end. It is the breath before remembering. You stare at the words, unable to speak. Chandra's voice trembles. It wasn't a warning, she says. It was a reassurance. For a long moment, you listen to the ocean. The hum aligns perfectly with your pulse again, 3 beats, pause, 2 beats, and in that rhythm you sense the quiet pulse of something ancient and kind. The makers, the listeners, the dreamers, they're gone yet not gone. They live in vibration, in stone, in the memory that matter carries. You understand now. The stone doesn't predict the future. It preserves the potential for it. Every civilization that falls leaves behind a whisper, and those whispers gather until someone somewhere listens again. That someone was you. The world isn't ending. It's resetting its breath. As dawn stretches across the sea, the light shifts into colors you've never seen before. Soft, violet, molten gold, the faintest shade of memory itself. Chandra closes her eyes and whispers, "Maybe this is what remembering feels like." You watch the sun climb higher, and for the first time since the desert, the wind carries no echo, only peace. Somewhere beneath the calm surface, the archive sleeps once more, waiting for another voice, another listener, another age. The hum fades slowly, leaving a silence so vast it feels sacred. You breathe, and the world breathes with you.